I did. I even cut out my little squares.
Oh God,
You
yeah,
are
very nice.
amazing. Can you hold it up to the camera and just show us, please? Because I want to get into a little practice of sharing. So, perfect. Nice. You could have got some colour ink there, Timmy.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've got
well,
it
I'll
now.
tell you, yeah, I didn't have coloured ink in the printer I use, so it is a little bit faint in some places when you print it out black and white.
Yeah, it is. So what I've got basically, if you're going to share something, you can just hold it up to the screen like this. Gemma, have you got something printed out?
No, because my printer's not working, but I have a notepad and I have
Right,
it on
that's fantastic. When you're following along, if you just create a little pattern a bit like this, what we'll do, you'll see why this is relevant. I'll just show you on mine a little 5-box pattern a bit like that, with the big box in the middle and then the 4 little boxes around the edge. That's a kind of structure to it that we're going to use. So straight into it. Firstly, thanks for joining. These are regular webinar events where I give people an insight into big picture. So the whole reason behind the product is a bit of a frustration of mine, because when working with businesses as a business analyst and project manager, I love to work with engaged employees. And I think we all know when we work with an engaged employee, or maybe when we're served by one, so they're really switched on, they're really into the business that they're working for. However, sometimes when companies and organizations are limited with time, we can't achieve that level of engagement with the constraint of time that we have. So what tends to happen in my experience, it all gets a bit difficult, or we run out of time, and what it turns into is a bit of a broadcast mechanism. Now, there's a bit of a trick there, which is why this webinar isn't just me broadcasting at you. What I want you to do is I'm going to go around and direct a little request to each of you to kind of show what you've got on screen. And I don't want you to put you under kind of any pressure, but just holding up a bit like that and kind of talking about what you've got. I'm going to ask you to kind of do things on the page. And then I would like you to show it, because this thing comes alive when we start having conversations. Now, to do that, I want you to think about a business that you care about. So it might be a business that you work for, or it might be that a business that you just care about, or actually you've got some kind of involvement with. So I want you to have that kind of in mind as we go through. So I want you to think about that. The first thing I want you to do, if you wouldn't mind, is to just introduce yourself. Maybe, I don't know who knows who. I know there's a few connections already, but Gemma, could you just tell us who you are, what sector you work in, and maybe a question, something on your mind that you'd like to get out to the webinar today?
Yeah, I'm Gemma. I own Lulu Photography and PR. I work in public relations, social media, content, compliance, and photography, obviously. I know Chris already. I'm not familiar with anyone else. Hi, Chris. What I suppose I'd really like to get out of this today is, obviously, when I'm dealing with clients, sometimes when they don't understand PR, obviously they know that they need it, but actually having them engaged in why they need to provide content, and understand really what we're doing and how it works, rather than just kind of seeing the press release out there in the news, understanding that a bit further.
No, that's excellent. That's excellent, Gemma. And I can certainly start that conversation off in this time that we've got. What we might do, which we've said already, we'll pick up maybe afterwards. I can give you specific bit of guidance around how we do that, because this is very much about engaging people within your business, and I'm going to pitch it at that level. But what you can do is spin it round and use it with potential clients. So I can certainly follow up with that if I don't manage to cover it in the session. So thanks for that. Chris, just a little introduction from you.
So hello, I'm Chris, and I work for the Marketing Optimist, and we're currently marketing your big pick. I'm on this webinar just for two reasons really. One, so I could see how they work, so I can more effectively market them. Two, so I can help Martin progress this particular webinar thing and see how we can develop it. And thirdly, because compared to now, as a very engaged employee in a business that I enjoy, I've been incredibly unengaged prior with bad managers in bad businesses, all the rest of it. So I'm kind of curious as to how I could have used Big Pick in the past and how I could still use it today, all the rest of it. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. I'm smiling a bit at that. I love the fact you made sure it was before you started working for Richie that you had the bad experience.
I'm incredibly engaged now, as you all know.
I was wanting you to just let that drift a little bit into the periods where you worked with Richie, and then we can feed back to Richie afterwards. Craig, a little bit name, sector, and the kind of question that you would maybe like to answer.
Sorry, Martin, were you talking to myself?
Yes, I was, Craig, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I'm Greg Jones-Stanley. I'm a business architect and transformation specialist, typically working with FTSE 100 clients in defence and utilities. If I kind of touch on both those points, business architecture is about designing the organisation, its structure, operating model. Transformation is the challenge for most businesses, where I tend to help. And what I've noticed over many years is that the way in which business thinks about transformation is very much process-centric rather than people-centric, when in fact to bring about performance for an organisation, the actual problem they're trying to solve, they need to engage with people and take them on a journey. So I'm a big advocate of inside-out approaches to consultancy, which is more coaching and supporting clients along that journey, and about the fundamental of people perform when they're empowered and enabled. So I've been working with Martin on and off for 10 years, and just to demonstrate the fact, Martin, here's the big picture over there on my board. So
physical kit out there.
Yeah, so I'm perhaps an advantage of some of you who've got the print-offs today, but I find it incredibly useful to frame and simplify business for business people, and really help people understand where they fit in, whether that's individuals or teams. So that's a bit about myself. Back over to everybody else.
Fantastic. Thank you, Craig. Brian, name, sector, and question you'd like answering.
Yeah, Brian Wood. I run a branding and web consultancy, The Message Collective. At the minute, we're just trying to push out in terms of just get a concerted social media and website presence, and just to develop that, and just look at and I suppose that's the first issue at the minute, and just try and get that more joined up. So I suppose the other issue that we're looking at is just how to work with external resources just to keep the work flowing out, because at the minute I haven't got a huge staff, so it's just trying to sort of orchestrate how that'll all fit together going forward. That's about the long and short of it, really. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Brian. Are you back in the NatWest Hub then? Is that where you are?
I am today. We were supposed to be having a meeting about another project, but we've been commandeered for this instead. So yeah, I am in the hub at the minute, but not actually at the hub, as in taking part. We're just in for a meeting.
You're still allowed in, though.
Oh, just come up and go, what are you two doing in here?
Yeah, it has to be asked, really. But okay, that's great. Timmy, I know I've recognised you around, but I don't know anything about what you do, so you're a bit of an unknown, so help me out.
How are you doing, mate? Well, I was just frantically then running for a power cable before my laptop ran out. So
yeah, we don't want to lose you. So obviously, Timmy, sector, no idea. Question, no idea. Do you want a few minutes to have a think about it?
I have. I've got a company called, and it's online marketplace, plant and tool hire. So out at the moment, and I'm pretty much a one-man. So I'll be looking to employ people in the future. So I just wanted to see, kind of get some tips on best practice for engagement.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I think I remember your pitch when you did. Did you do the stripper for the weekend?
I did.
That was the funniest gag I think I've ever heard in a pitch. and if you've not, a Gemma's looking blank.
There you go, then. You remembered it, didn't you?
You really need to hear it. Right, we must get on timing amongst us. I'll share that with Gemma next week. I'll recount the story next week. It's a good pitch story. So you've got, hopefully there's some prop in front of you.
I don't have to think I'm a pervert.
Yeah, no, it's been a good story. In front of you, hopefully you've got the problem. What I'd like you to do for the business that you care about, you see this little green patch at the top. What I'd like you to do is just to put what you care about. I'd just like you to put in the purpose of your business at the top and this name here. So the name of your business here and the purpose or mission of the business here. Could be a vision, could be a purpose, could be something like that. What's the business here for? And I'd just like you to write that in the top left and then in the middle of the page, please. I'm going to follow along as well. So I'm actually demonstrating. And then what that will allow me to do is to give you an example of how, back to the point about employees making connections and joining the dots. Craig mentioned about simplification. I believe if you give people the right environment and the right props, and it's not something that's that complicated, what they'll do is they'll start engaging and interacting. And this is a much cut down version of the product that we've seen on the board there in the background of Craig. But actually, I'm hoping to demonstrate in the short time we've got how you start making connections about things. So for instance, for me, my business name is at Your Big Pick or Your Big Pick. And I'm just simply, for brevity, I'm going to write join your dots in the top like that, as simple as you can get. There you are, look, at Your Big Pick, join your dots. And clearly a vision or mission can be quite complex, but for the sake of time, it can be actually quite a simple thing. So hopefully, Timmy, from your demeanour, have you been able to do that at the top of your page?
Sorry, Matt, I've jumped the gun a little bit because I've written in what.
No, that's good. What does this say?
I put obviously my name in the name box.
Yeah.
And I put the purpose. I wrote in there the purpose of my business.
Okay.
So I kind of put to empower the seamless selection, hire of plant and tool.
Wow.
The DIY trade and construction industry.
Blimey, you started off by setting an expectation I was going to have to do a bit of helping out, and then you just kind of gave us the full whammy. So that sounds like it's quite well developed in terms of you've been around it a few times to arrive at that. Is that fair, or is that
yeah? I think that's more than fair. Yeah.
And my observation is with something like that, and I just put a bit of a theme out on LinkedIn for this webinar, what I want to be able to do by the end is revisit that and work out what it might mean for a fictional team member like Bob, who's in your business. Like, how do you know that's successful? Like, is that something he would say back to you? And like, because it's all well and good you saying it, but not everyone might care about your business as much as you do.
Yeah.
So the whole idea we might combine, because it's quite important to get that kind of purpose right. I'll just ask for one more. Gemma, and were you able to write in the purpose and vision of your business at the top?
Yeah, I know you can't see that. So it's Lily Photography and PR, and kind of how I promote myself is I bring brands to life through creative photography, innovative media relations, and unique digital campaigns.
Wow, that's quite a lot there's a lot to that. Do you think it's as simple as it can be without being too simple? Or do you think it's kind of in its final state because it has to have all those things in it?
I think it can be explained a lot simpler. So, I mean, I could just say I put brands in front of the right people in a creative way. But for the purpose of kind of social media and keeping everything in line with my website and what my kind of brand values and everything are, I keep that.
Yeah.
That is, but yeah, it could be a lot simpler.
No, that's fine, because I think what I observe when I'm working with businesses is the level they pitch that purpose and vision. It gives you what I call a bit of wriggle room underneath. So it doesn't have to be kind of a complex way of thinking about it. It's just, if you get that right, then a lot of things are possible underneath, and a lot of things drop out and align because you've got your purpose and vision out. And we'll go through this as a bit of a theme, but I think starting with the vision is, if you don't get that right, it can create a bit of a confusing statement from the beginning, especially if it's something that's lifted from a a board report or some form of management team meeting that doesn't really connect to the individuals and the employees. And that's the whole key, is if you have a team and you ask the team what would they want to kind of rally around and huddle around, what would they say? And we'll get on to later how you actually test that is working in the business. How does that work for Bob in the business? So we'll move on a little bit. So thanks for sharing that. What I'd like you to do in the center of the page, you've got the big box for you, Gemma, is you've got a box in the center of the page. And in the center of it, you've got the yellow symbol here. So you can see I've just drawn around the big box. And what we do with big picture here is, imagine you're in a room and you have some challenges, opportunities in the business. What we're doing is stepping out people's understanding of how they see the business from their point of perspective. So in the center of the page, the whole reason I kind of designed it this way was to talk about the products and services. So the heading I've got at the top of there is operations. So these are all easy words for people to get. So this is about delivery. So you would be sat around in your little subgroups or people who are trying to help you with the business. And this part of the conversation would be about what products and services do you actually deliver? So this is about the what. So if we leave the purpose and the vision at the top, and what we start to talk about are the products and services. So for big picture as an example, we provide programs and workshops and kits. So if you go on the Big Picture website, which Richie and Chris have helped me with, is you'll see the thing we actually sell are programs, workshops and kits. And what we would do in Big Picture style is there's not much space on the A4. Most of our products are a bit bigger. We would write it in and then we would kind of box it off as simply as that. They don't have to be very tidy. What you do find when you're filling this out is that you tend to start seeing and giving insight into how people see things differently. So the way you make these notes, you might be used to mind mapping, or you might not be very visual at all, in which case you might be just making more of a list format. But the whole idea, and this is a really important point here, is in whoever it is you're speaking to, however well developed they are in their understanding of the business, I use the word forcing, but that's too strong a word. What you're encouraging is them to externalize and verbalize and write down what they're thinking. And sometimes that's really important, because once it's out on the page, it's something you can get at and work with. If they're just thinking it, what they're more likely to do is internalize it and complain about it around the coffee machine or the lift or wherever they feel comfortable. So the whole idea is it's tipping out onto the page. Brian, from your perspective, in terms of the stuff that you deliver, is that something, I know we've had chats about that before, and I think you mentioned it in your introduction. Is it easy to find 2 or 3 titles or headings that you actually deliver, or is it more elaborate and complicated than that?
I mean, you can obviously work around it, but in essence, it's brand design, web design, and display design. So environments, anything online, and the actual brand, of a company, the essence of the brand of a company. So yeah, they're the 3 main areas really. Yeah. There's all things around that in terms of social media support, which I draw in other people to help with, and hosting and all the things that go around it. But that's in essence what it is.
Yeah, and do you find some of those things come to the fore and fall to the back in the way that you're thinking strategically about the business based on some logic? Like you want to focus on certain things, but then let some things go because there's only so much time in the week, right? So you can only work on so many things. So is that pretty stable for you, that list of things, or is it always changing?
It's always changing, and it's all down to, because a lot of existing clients will come in for one element and then say, so they maybe start off with a brand design, but then move on and want a web design or a web design update. And then later down the line, they might come back and say, I need some display elements. These are all existing clients. Obviously, if I'm going out for new clients, I generally do go for branding and web design because they're the sort of bigger payers in a way. But we'll look at, especially with existing clients, we'll look at whatever design elements they need,
Yeah. I think one thing I'll pick out from what you're saying there is the whole reason Big Picture works from a symbol perspective. You notice down the left-hand side, Big Picture uses 8 symbols on 3 sides of a path. So it's 2, 4, and then 2, making up the 8. And the whole idea with the grasp stage, which is the middle part of the path, is it has a measure symbol. One of the most important symbols on there is the measure symbol. So you mentioned a couple of times there, and we're all into the kind of analytics and the measuring, etc. Knowing what's working and what isn't is something you would then work with the measure symbol. And what you would do is take that symbol and place it on the template, which is what we're going to be doing in a moment. So just to kind of point there about when you're talking, what Big Picture helps with is that it kind of crystallizes things around measures, technology, challenges, team, and customer. And we'll get on to customer now. So let's talk about customer. You'll see here on mine, you've got this yellow path running from, I love Gemma's dog, by the way. That shouldn't be left unnoticed because that's too much.
Sorry, it's a bit of a can't be like without me for 2 minutes.
Definitely have his own webcam. Because then we could have a whole participant around the dog. What's your What's his name?
Odin.
Odin, beautiful. We'll add him to the MI. So when we're looking at participant numbers, Chris, it was dog one off. So brilliant. So what do is to think about your customers now, because Big Picture sells programs, workshops, and kits using this technique or intellect IP, if you like. My clients really are more business to business. So on here, I'll just show you here. What I do is this left-hand side here, where I've got the customer. The customer is the yellow symbol, and it's the first time we've kind of got into the symbol side of Big Picture. And just underneath it, what I do is identify the customer. So just for the purposes of this introduction, you could just vaguely call it business to consumer or business to business. What I would say is there's a whole conversation around that customer segmentation on the left hand side. This is where you do your kind of persona work or your segmentation. But what's interesting, I don't like to get too heavy into that, because when you're talking to different teams within a business with different levels of understanding, they don't necessarily have those names in their language. So you wouldn't talk personas or segmentation. What you'd say is, who do we sell to? Who do you come into touch? Who do you come into contact with? Who do you deal with? Based on the in the business should come. We've got 2 dogs. That's this is becoming a bit of a dog thing. There's a lot. I've got a dog as well. I'm not going to now try and get a 3rd dog in.
It's the way forward, man.
I think it definitely is. So if you could just identify your customer down and just put the little descriptor under the customer symbol there. I probably won't hang around with that one, because I think it's a pretty well-defined one, and it doesn't get me to the kind of connection piece quick enough. So what we've got now is a kind of triangulation of the purpose and the vision at the top, the products and services at the center, and then the customer on the left. You can imagine, if you can, it's all in our heads at the moment, and you're just interacting with the paper that you've got in front of you. However, if you can just imagine, the power of Big Picture comes in when you've got small teams or people working together, where what you're doing is prompting a conversation. So what you might think is obvious to you isn't necessarily obvious to others. So if you're wanting someone to help you with a business, or Gemma, you were going out to talk to a potential client, what you're doing is really demonstrating your understanding of the business in the way that they can engage with and talk to you about. Because what brain likes to do is to go, I pretty much get what you're thinking, and this. It's an and this conversation, rather than a, oh, but I don't get that, or but I'll let you continue. I don't really understand what you're talking about, but I don't want to be rude. So the kind of conversation that happens with Big Picture is very much and this, and then suddenly you've got the aha moments of actually going, I get that. So let's crack on, because I'm looking at the time. So what I want you to do is, if you've got the prop, and you haven't, Gemma, but you see this left-hand side, you've got the symbols. I just want you, if you haven't already, to kind of tear those off or cut them off if you can, because we're going to actually place them on the Big Picture sheet. Timmy's already done this because he's like a master advanced user. With no dog, but a fantastic vision statement. And if that's not your LinkedIn profile bio by the end of the day, Timmy, I don't know what is. That's what it should say. So I just want you to tear off. So I'm now going to take the red symbol, which is this one. We've got a bit of a framework in which to work in, and I've got this little red symbol here. This is actually the poker chip that Craig might plonk on his board. But actually, in big picture land, we have kind of smaller sticker versions. Now, I couldn't send you the stickers, but you have the cutout version. Craig's reaching over for something, I think. So you take this team symbol here, and I want you to identify a key person in the business. Now, because of who I'm speaking to, this might actually be you. Or if you've got a helper or someone doing something in the business that is what you consider to be, significant in any way, then just identify them. And what you do is you take your sheet and you place it on the part of the business that person is helping with. So, for instance, if I have a practitioner running running a workshop, then actually that practitioner would go in the workshop box there. So what I'm saying is, in a mind map kind of style, we deliver workshops, and that could be, for me, a practitioner who I ask to run that workshop. So it's a way of me identifying that person as a key person. Craig, from your perspective, who would you think about as a key person? Hang on. Go ahead.
Myself?
Yeah. Anyone else you'd like to know?
Yeah. So Jimmy, as part of my team, Chris, who's a good affiliate and associate of mine that tends to pass a number of clients to me. Mm-hmm. Yourself as a partner. Mm-hmm. Yeah, people like that.
And all those, each of us there would appear at different places on the big pick. I guess.
That's right.
Because and when you're listing them like that, it appears it's like A to B to C. But without being funny, we're not all the same, and we offer many different things. In your mind, we offer different things to the business. Like, I'm not Jimmy, Jimmy's not me, Chris isn't either of us. We all do different things. So what I'm helping Craig do when we sit down and talk, if it was for the first time, what I'd be understanding is how Craig sees those people within the business. And I think that is more relevant, maybe, Gemma, to people who are working within the team and employee engagement than it maybe is to demonstrate in your business to somebody who you might be selling services to. But the people there is very much about understanding how the person interacting with big pictures sees the key people within the business. I want to go on to this symbol here, which is the measure symbol. You should have a little cutout version of it. And we mentioned this earlier when Brian was talking. The measure symbol is all about measuring something within the business. So because the theme of this webinar, I want to hone in on the vision and what it means to Bob, I'm challenging myself and thinking, if Bob is in my business, how do I know, how can I tell, including Bob, how that vision is working? And for me, it's how many, what I want him to indicate to me, measures down here, how many ideas and how many programs are actually based on some of the ideas that he's been involved with. So that's quite complex. There's a number of steps there. But what I'm saying is, if these are Bob's ideas that are being put into outcomes, I know that that vision is working because the ideas are actually landing as opportunities and outcomes in the business. And whilst that's actually quite a complex number of steps to get to, actually, in big picture terms, it's just really simple, because you can ask that question, people fiddle around with the symbols. So my question to you is simply, not that example, it's just what measure would you use in the business? So take that measure symbol and place it somewhere on the business. Timmy, where would you put your measure? What's a key measure in your business?
Well, I don't know. I was just trying to think that. You might have to come back to me because I was just trying to think where's the best place for me to place it.
Normally, because we've just got the one measure symbol, it makes it look like we're looking for like the main one, but really it's just an example of one. So I don't know whether anybody else has got an example. Gemma, have you got an example of a measure in your business that you've thought about or might do in the future?
I think, unless I've misunderstood this, I suppose the measure for me is the kind of how the PR campaigns actually help the client grow. So if they're reporting back to me, you know, that they've had increased membership or increased sales, or they've had further inquiries on the back of some PR that we've put out, then that's how I measure how effective I'm being and how my vision is kind of effective.
That's spot on, Gemma. So what you've actually done there without realising it is gone for me a better measure than one I normally get, which is how many hits we're getting on the website, you know, how am I doing, how am I interacting up at the top of the customer journey line, so like up here. But what you've actually talked about is one that's more powerful, which is what are the effects and the outcomes from the work that you do, because that's what's going to help the customer come back round and come back to you, which is this yellow line that goes across the top, and that's why it's on the template. So what that allows us to do is, although that's quite a complex thought process that's gone into that, when it falls onto the page, all it means is little teams and individuals within your community are giving you an indication whether most of the measures are up at the top of the customer journey. The question being, why aren't they down at the other end? Because that's what's going to drive the customer to come back. So all it is a bit of a simple picture, but actually it's demonstrating some quite complex points. That's a really good example. Craig, have you got an example of
that? I'm more reflecting on what you're sharing there, Martin. For me, one of the powers of big picture is very simply getting people around the table on the same page, which is the challenge in most people's businesses. Although they might see the same thing, they might think about it, talk about it, describe it in very different ways, and therefore being able to visualize how things are arranged today can often identify how things can be improved tomorrow, and from that perspective is a very powerful tool for nudging improvements along, allowing the business to evolve, and also really enabling to stand back from the business. So I think in the case of Gemma and one or two others, they're very much running their own business and therefore heavily involved in operations. But if the overall vision objective is to grow that business, you've got to start thinking about how you create a business and bring people into that to either take care of sales and marketing or to manage finance and accounting, rather than simply being solely focused on the operational aspects of the business.
Yeah, and I think one thing on that point you mentioned about halfway through is the fact there's something about getting the thoughts of individuals out on the table so they can then work together and then bring it together. So the scenario that would work there is that you use the A2 sheets with individuals and small groups, but then you have a board like Craig has got in the middle of the room or at the front of the office. And what that provides is once people have bought into the framework and they're familiar with it, what they'll do is they can then look over the shoulders of other people around the table, and what forms is a very natural process of, we now get the framework, we now get the template, we now understand what the symbols mean. We'll then happily walk over to a group over the other side of the room and instigate a conversation, but in a much more effective way, because in effect we're using the same language. That feels really natural if the symbols are chosen correctly, if the design of them make it easy to access, and the physical props are actually good to work with. And that's the whole thought and idea behind the product, that all those things have happened. So the conversation in a room with your colleagues, whether they be internal or external, actually just flows, and you can play around with if we get onto challenges and opportunities, I'll give you another example of that. So the two last symbols we're going to look at are the challenges and opportunities symbol. So there's the opportunity symbol, which is the light bulb, and the challenge symbol is here. So just both at once, really, because challenges and opportunities can be interrelated, just for sake of time. What we'll do is take the challenge symbol and just place it onto the place it onto the big picture template where you think there's a challenge in your business. So I'm going to flip the thinking and give the kind of obvious one that I normally kind of get for businesses, especially SMEs, the challenge around kind of getting business in. So it's almost the opposite end of the customer journey, Gemma, from where you went for the first time. It's like how you get business in, which is probably that scenario that we might follow up with, which is using big picture to demonstrate the value that you're going to add to a business. You might use skills and tools here that Brian's involved with, that Chris are involved in, to get the business in at this end. So just maybe think about, just take the challenge and opportunity symbol and just place it somewhere on the big picture notes. And just for time, whilst you're doing that, I'll kind of do a bit of a summary and wrap up some of the themes we've brought together. I started this by kind of saying it's about cracking your vision for Bob. Bob's an employee within a business. What we've tried to demonstrate there in a very short space of time is that by giving people the right prompts, the right props, and an environment in which they feel safe and open to share, what they'll do is they'll, by a series of prompts, share what they think on a form of physical prop that they can then talk to with their colleagues. And because of that, they can make sense of that vision in the day-to-day work that they're doing. We can use the big picture symbols to kind of use the measures, link it. I don't know if you've noticed when you're doing it, but the customer journey, the yellow line that runs left to right, there's actually something significant about that, because if you place things close to the customer journey, which you might have related to earlier, Emma, it was about their outcomes, then that measure is going to be close to the customer journey. There may be some internal measures that you don't use so much and the customer doesn't see. So you can use big picture as a bit of a customer journey piece from left to right, identify all the touch points and actually see which are the key people, which are the measures, which are the challenges and opportunities that relate to that. So that's a bit of a summary. In terms of reflections, I don't want to hold you up too long. The sun's out and the weekend's here. Any kind of reflections, just basically what you've done, and just relating back to the question you opened up with in your introduction, is anything you'd like to reflect on? I'll start with Tim, if that's okay.
Hey, mate.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's mentions on. Learn from it.
I think I'm losing Tim's data a little bit. Brian, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, just while you were going through that, I came up with quite a bit of insight in terms of just dropping the challenge and the opportunity on. Obviously, as you said, the challenge for most small companies is getting the marketing right. But then looking at the customer care side, I saw that as an opportunity to, as you say, just try and get the customers to do repeat business. And one of the ways I thought, in terms of doing that, was to get more measurement from the work that I'd already done, because that can be quite powerful, and then feeding that back to the existing customers to give them more confidence to get that repeat business. So if you can sort of in a way shout about your successes in a more considered way in terms of actual analytic results, then they're more likely to come back and say, oh, do you know what, I'll get some more work. And so I've I suppose I could try and hold it up. Sort of created that sort of
nice
idea, and drawing lines all over it to make it work.
Yeah, so if we call those the dots, what you've done there is joined a few dots, which simply, the whole idea, big picture, and that helps. So I don't know what's going to come out because I'm not with you, and I know we're sharing across, but what's interesting is as you add bigger versions of big picture with more symbols, if you imagine the amount of permutations and the level of conversation that happens, we must remind ourselves this is just an insight, but what it's giving you is an idea of, if you open this out to more people, the kind of conversations that happen. Gemma, from your perspective, have you anything been unearthed on your sheet there, any reflections that might be worth sharing?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite difficult to kind of relate to not having any employees, but I think it's kind of, it's made me realise kind of what challenges and about the customer experience you were talking about earlier, is that actually I'm already doing that without realising. So by identifying that, there's areas that I can pick up on and then develop those.
Yeah.
I think one of my main challenges is, I suppose you call it fear or risk, not getting too much ahead of myself too quickly, and maybe actually I need to just have a little bit more faith and consider maybe taking someone on to help out with certain things so I can focus on more the strategic direction and have a bit of support.
I think that's a pattern we see a lot in certainly the SME market around. Like, there's a book called The Entrepreneurial Myth, which is Michael Gerber saying you can't do everything. You have to kind of take yourself out of the business, and you've got to work out which bit of the business you can take on some help with and where to focus, where you give the most value. So that is a pattern that comes out particularly with SMEs. Just basically getting out of your own way, understanding your business sufficiently to know which bits you add value to, which is most probably within either delivery or management and admin. But even within that, if you do too much delivery, what you're not doing is working on the business. So it's been aware of that. And I know the coaches in NatWest and all of the coaches talk about the same stuff. The difference here is you are encouraging people to internalize, think about it and externalize it and make their own connections based on the fact if you tell them it's not true, they say it's true. You know, there's that old adage, you can tell people loads of stuff, but until the penny drops and they make their own connection, they're probably not going to do anything about it. And that's where the opportunity turns into outcome. Just one more reflection from Craig, and then we'll break off and hit some sun. Craig, anything new in there for you? Because your advanced use are quite familiar, but I'm just wondering if there's anything for you.
Yeah, not so much in terms of. I'm using Big Picture quite regularly, so it's more of a reflection based on what's been discussed. As I said, I'm a business architect and transformation specialist, so immediately you can go into multiple methods, multiple tools, big frameworks, all gets very complex really quickly. What you've had an introduction today is something that's very simple, very effective. It prompts you to capture briefly what the purpose and vision of this business is, to help you think about who the customer is and to focus on the customer journey. The big piece around engagement is actually distributing on that business model who fits in, whether it is the customer or multiple customer segments, or whether it's actually Joe Bloggs, who's the accountant, Fred, who refers me work, etc., etc. But you can very quickly get all the basic fundamental information that you require to be able to see your business on a page. And for that, that's very, very, very powerful. I think certainly as in bigger businesses, people get mystified by all kinds of different tools and techniques rather than focus on the actual hard output, which is who is your customer? Why do they come to me? What feedback do I get? How do I build a sales and marketing channel? How do I know that's being effective? All those good stuff all comes back down to people and measures.
Yeah,
and how people are organised.
Yeah, that's great. Those kind of shared values, what you find with people, there's a kind of human element to it, which is all very natural and easy to talk about. So it doesn't require any pre-education or background in business change. We can go off and be clever as we like, but actually this is about putting an engagement wrapper around either the services we're offering or the business, which in Craig's term is like business transformation. In your terms, Gemma, it's different. It's providing that PR stuff. However, and the marketing, the work that you do, but actually it's about demonstrating, getting a conversation going around your business and people being passionate and engaged and demonstrating all the good stuff that you do. So it's intended as a kind of adapted framework, that the framework is there, but the way you then talk through it and apply it is based on the situation that you're in. So we'll sign off there if there's nothing else. I thank you all for participating. Reminding you that Big Picture is all about programs, workshops and kits. www.yourbigpick.com, and there's lots of stuff on the YouTube channel, and there'll continue to be so, with various different experiences and content being shared. I know it's working when people share content back with me to say, we use Big Pick, this was the output, the conversation was great, and we're now moving on to the next stage. So I thank you all for your time, and we'll sign off there. We'll see you around. I will catch up with you for some feedback. And Gemma, we might catch up about that specific application for when you go out and get you some kit that you can have a play with. Fantastic, guys. Thanks so much.
Have a great weekend, Bill.
Andrew, take care. Bye for now.
Bye.